to Bombshell Brunches, where your hosts Raquel Rudenberg and Christina Lau sip and spill with badass babes every Tuesday morning.
Happy Tuesday!
Tuesday.
Yay! We're going to try something different this time. So we're going to do instead of a rose and thorn, which I loved, we're going to do a learning, loathing, loving, and see how that fits. See how it works for us. We're going to make the rose and thorn our own.
Yep.
Okay, Raquel, you go.
All right. Well, this week I am learning about probability and applying sample data to populations, which has been interesting. I am loathing being behind on school. I had a big project due and it took me longer than I expected. And so it's put me behind on my homework. And there's nothing I loathe more than being behind on a deadline. So loathing that, but I am loving getting my shit back on track. So working out again, trying to get my shit together, and it's happening. And so I'm feeling good about it. How about you?
I saw that Instagram post that when you were, I don't know if you were rock climbing or horse riding or I don't know, archery, whatever you do as Wonder Woman. But yeah, exercise is important, especially as we go into the winter months on this side of the world. I am learning to create a better space for myself when it comes to allowing people to suck up my time. And I live my life batting against a childhood kind of want to please people. So I'm learning that. And that's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck is a book that I read to really help with that. And it really has. I am loathing the fact that it is coming into winter, and I've been not looking forward to that. So that's why I love your note on the exercise. I should go for a winter walk soon. And I am loving my friend's mascara product that she released some time ago, but it's not available in Canada yet. But she sent me some of her products because I was just so excited to get them. And I couldn't procure them here. And it sounds small, but good mascara is my favorite facial product to have. It goes on easily, comes off easily, and it looks fabulous. So Natasha Moore Cosmetics, Sephora Canada, please stock it. That's my learning, loving, loathing, loving, learning.
All of it.
And now let's get into who our amazing guest for today. I know Raquel has known Kemi for quite some time, since they were teenagers.
We were like 15 and working at Tim Hortons. First job.
Amazing. First job friends. And Raquel, you do the succinct intro, because we know I ramble, so I'm going to shut myself up.
Well, Kemi is just like the all-knowing being. I love her to death. So she's equally right brain, left brain. And we are talking to her about everything from looking for good information, the appending election, fake news, scientific research versus scientific reporting, which is very timely due to COVID right now.
Mm-hmm.
And we run the gamut. We talk about French tube and BO and you name it.
We have a lot of laughs in this episode. I think it's just so joyous, but very, very important information, and identifying misinformation. So yeah, I'm excited.
It's dense.
It's dense. You're right. It's dense. Let's get dense. Sounds terrible. Okay. Anyway, on with the show. Kemi.
Hello.
Hi. Welcome. Kemi is such good friends with Raquel, and they miss each other very, very much. I am so excited to get into these conversations with you. So give me a background. Tell us how you grew up, why you decided to pursue sciences and a career in sciences. And I'm so fascinated by how you managed to combine such a wide variety into what seems like such a fulfilling and exciting career. Go.
Okay. Let's sum up all in one. Okay. Well, I know that you were saying that you have, kind of a multi-ethnic background. Well, so do I. So I was born in Nigeria. My mom is Canadian. She was born and raised in Ontario, and she moved to Nigeria in her 20s. and she was there for like 15 years and then got married and had me and my brother. And then we lived there till I was about 4, and then we moved to New Brunswick, where I also have family. And we lived there for only about 10 months, and then we moved to Colombia, and I grew up in Colombia. I lived there till I was about 15. So I'm bilingual and I speak Spanish, and I identify really well with a lot of Latin culture because of that. And then we moved back to New Brunswick, and then we moved to BC. And I finished high school on the West Coast, and I went to university on the West Coast. And actually, interestingly enough, I originally wasn't planning on doing sciences. I applied and got a scholarship to take journalism at Carleton right out of high school, and I decided that I didn't want to do that, and I panicked and I turned down my scholarship, and I took about a gap year slash a gap semester, and I went back to school to take, I think I upgraded my physics or something, and then I decided I was going to become an undergrad in sciences. And I started out in biology because I loved biology. I thought it was awesome. And then actually, while I was in university, I'd never heard of it before, and I found epidemiology, which is, its own little, I kind of call it like a subset of molecular biology, if people know what that is, but it's more its own field. It's the study of pathogens. So I did my undergrad in molecular epidemiology, and then in my last 2 years of university, I kind of also did a little side thing in population health research, which is more population-based epidemiology, kind of in the arts, and I focused on maternal health in that. And then
see, when you said pathogens, I just went straight to the plague. I was like, tell me about the Black Death.
I thought about zombies.
Do a whole podcast on the Black Death.
I mean, we could do a whole broadcast on anything to do with epidemiology. Honestly, the most fascinating disciplines, I think, basically ever. The first epidemiologist, well, the father of epidemiology, his name is John Snow, if any Game of Thrones fans out there. Yeah, but he's kind of the father of epidemiology, and he discovered that cholera was waterborne based on a map. Like, he looked at a map of London, and he found that all these people were getting sick near water pumps, and so he petitioned the city and had the handle of a water pump in this one neighborhood removed, and then the cholera deaths went down. And anyways, he's a very famous epidemiologist, so if you study epidemiology, people know who he is and know this map that he used.
What time, when was this? What year was it? Or
that
around era? Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
so like
don't ask me that.
16, I don't know, because I immediately was like, who was the cartographer? We need to talk to people about maps as well, right? Like, how accurate were those systems?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was like kind of a street map of London, and he like clustered all these outbreaks and tried to figure out like where they were happening, and he realized that they were happening in and around like where people got water from this one water pump.
Right. Amazing. Oh, yeah. Cool. So this is a good time for you to be studying diseases.
Yeah.
Or the most stressful time, because I bet anyone that knows what you do is like, hey.
Actually,
my first question to Kemi was, so guess who I've been meaning to call for so long now. I'm
Since
dying.
The start of the pandemic.
Yeah. No, it's funny. I've actually had a few people reach out to me just to kind of make sense of it all, or people like getting into arguments with relatives and being like, Kemi, like I need to know like how to tell my dad that like this doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, okay, let me break it down for you.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like that in and of itself is an online course, right?
For sure.
So tell me about, so you grew up everywhere, which is awesome. And then how did you decide, how would you describe what you do now? Who are you now?
So to finish up, I guess, after I finished my epidemiology degree, I worked in a couple different science fields, and I kind of went back and forth. I knew I wanted to go back for a master's at some point, but I couldn't decide on what. I actually did a little aside. I took an associate degree in graphic design. So I have a graphic design degree.
Yeah.
And then I worked as a graphic designer for a few years. I moved to Toronto, which is where I live now. And then I really wanted to combine, like, I'm very passionate about science and I'm very passionate about design, and I've always been pretty artistic. And I really wanted to combine these two things. I feel like science could benefit greatly from design, and design
Science could look better.
could look better.
Let's just
or
not
think
sugarcoat
better
that.
and use design thinking, or any number of things. Anyways, so I looked for like an interdisciplinary master's program where I would sort of be able to tailor my degree to my two passions. So basically what I do now is I'm taking strategic foresight, and my thesis is in and around the communication of disinformation, and specifically around science and science literacy. And
Yeah, cool. I totally see how that came from design and biology.
it does.
I know. That's what I'm
Okay.
like. My brain just was like,
Right? It makes sense.
It will make sense, I'm sure, by the end of this conversation. But strategic foresight coming from I'm just going to sit here and be mind blown for the whole time, just because I love it. Because I think that so many of our audience members have so many different things that they've grown up doing. Incidentally, things that they, yours has been, it seems very strategic, but I think a lot of people have these transferable skills that they don't combine together. So I love that. I'm excited to learn more about how they join. So tell me what strategic foresight is.
Ooh, hard one. So strategic foresight is very hard to define. And I'm going to preface this by saying I had an internship, and my first interview question was, what is define strategic foresight? And I got the question wrong. So I still got the internship. I will add that. I still got the internship, but I answered, and my interviewer was like, nope, that's not right.
What was your first answer? Tell me the wrong answer first.
Honestly, I can't even remember. I was super jet lagged. I don't even remember, but I was wrong. So strategic foresight is basically a way to analyze and look at future possibilities and about like big existential questions, or some people take on big existential questions, and look at things that we are doing now, or that we have in our systems now, that can lead to these futures. And we say futures very strategically because
there are multiple
Ooh. And we can't define the future, but we can learn, like they say, learning from the future. We can learn from these different possibilities and build them into our systems now, or maybe look for signs of things to avoid. And
you know what, that's very well put, because I actually in high school did a course called future problem solving.
Okay.
And it was very similar, and it changed my whole life. And it was very similar to here are a series of problems. Here are series of circumstances. What are the various different outcomes? How can we make positive impact? And it encouraged you to critically think in order to see different possibilities. So I love that. That's great. Great. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I will say you can apply it to anything. So you can apply it to biology, or you can apply it to...
Fab.
I want to jump in because the rest of this stuff, which I'm so excited about, but you were in Paris when COVID hit, right?
I was.
I wanted you to talk about that a little bit, and your experience with that and getting home. And
it was a crazy time. So I was when COVID hit, and I was doing the internship I talked about, where I got the question wrong, and I still got the internship. I was working at the OECD, and it was really awesome. COVID hit, and it all kind of happened like really suddenly in Paris. The government was very, I think, I don't want to say this because I'm being recorded, but like a kind of in denial of happening, or really like we just didn't know as a world. Like it was becoming a really big issue in Italy, and of course Paris, and Milan had Milan Fashion Week, and then COVID exploded all over that province. And then the very next week is Paris Fashion Week. And so I was like, COVID's about to explode. Like, not underplayed, but people just didn't really know what to do. Like people were, if you hadn't come directly from Italy or from China, like you couldn't get tested. It was just crazy. And people were just like, well, should we shut down? Should we not shut down? Are things happening? And then it like was night and day. Like the very next day, like everything shut down. Schools were shut down. Couldn't go back to my office, like everything. So it was just a really kind of chaotic time. And of course I don't speak French very well, and I wasn't home, so I was really stressed out. So I just, as soon as they said, work is shut down, I was like, I'm leaving. I'm going home.
Yeah.
I guess I'm computer with me, and I will see you all from Toronto. So that's kind of how I dealt with that. But
yeah,
yeah.
A pathologist stuck in a pandemic at the beginning of a pandemic, and everyone's like, I mean, imagine being that person that's got the most scientific knowledge at the start of the plague, and you're like, don't touch that.
Well, to be fair,
touch it.
But I was like,
sorry, but yes,
I was taking the subway to work every day, just being like, this is crazy. Like, the subway in Paris is the least socially distanced place I've ever been in my life.
So
I'm from Hong Kong.
Ever been. I'm sure it's like, it's got to be the same.
And
like,
London. It's
you literally just like live in another person's armpit your entire way to work.
That's right. Yes.
And then I was like, I either already have COVID or like,
or I'm completely immune.
It was, yeah.
Oh no, the imagery in my brain.
I'm pretty short, so for me the armpit imagery is spot on. Like,
that just reminds me of being incredibly hungover in London and having to be on the subway there, and it was just the most disgusting thing I've ever experienced.
Was it boiling as well? Because when it's boiling,
so hot. It was
you're in everyone's armpits then.
Oh,
you just live in other people's BO and just like this like big waft air, like it's thick.
You know,
you can feel it when you.
Tiny little tip from someone who's grown up in very humid places, and London is so good. If you have, like, I sweat a lot, I will admit, but when perfume oil, it actually, as your underarms heat up and start to get a bit sweaty, it emits the oil more. So my older sister taught me that trick, and I was like, I am using that. So if anyone out there, just a little glam aside, use a nice oil, or get like, a cologne that is an oil, because the oil, I guess, is more activating.
It's like more of a,
rather than the antiperspirant that then once it's through, it's like, well, we made it through the gate, and now it's just pure stench.
Sweat.
This is going really well. This we're talking about disease.
Well, we're gonna move on from stench to more stench.
Excellent.
Because I, in prep for this chat with Kemi, I pulled some headlines that I found very hilarious, and they're headlines that are talking about research that was done and are just missing the mark. Which, when we're talking about stench, there's just a whole onslaught of jokes that can go with that. But my favorite one was climate change is literally a boner killer. There were many variations of this one. Different headlines that I enjoyed was Mother Nature, just one giant cock block. Was the mood? Economists warn of less sex.
We were laughing about that. Yeah, because economists are really, they're all about the sex lives. I was like,
why the economists?
Yeah, they're very concerned.
Well, sometimes they do say, fuck the money. That's as far as it goes, I think.
Oh my God. And then another one we were talking about, which was beards are covered in poop. Study.
I like that they formalized it with a study.
A study.
Rather than an opinion.
There's like a colon and then a study. Which now my brain just can't stop making connections, because like colon and I don't know.
I know. I literally went straight there.
I just
my head was in my ass.
So I think that's a really good lead into talking about how you can actually critique research. And I mean, Kemi knows this and Christina knows this, but I don't know that everyone knows this. So I come from an arts background, and my degree is in communications and kind of that world. And now I'm kind of copying Kemi in reverse, because now I'm going into a master's. I'm now finally catching up with everything she always knew and learning about to actually break down science and understand like if there's a good sample and how to really critique it, which even within just a few weeks of starting it, I found just immensely useful. And I could not believe that this was not something taught to everybody in like, so Kemi, can you tell us the best ways to critique research?
Ooh, I can try.
Or just some top tips, what to look out.
Yeah. So I think one big distinction I make all the time, and I use this when I talk to people all the time, is there's a big difference between and I'm sure you know this, there's a big difference between scientific research and scientific reporting. And I feel like there's a very big gap between, because especially now, reporting and with the like online world that we have, it has to be like sexy, and it has to grab your attention, and it has to make people want to click on the link so that they can get advertising revenue. And so it has to be clickable. It has to be something, you have to be able to boil down this massive study into something that somebody is going to click on so that you can make money. And so a reporter is going to say something like beards are covered in shit or whatever poo, sorry. But yeah, like a reporter is going to say that. They're not going to be like, well, we swabbed 4,000 beards and this many percentage of them came back with detectable forms of coliform, which is the growth that indicates that there's poo in the sample.
Poo in it. Okay.
And so those two things are separate. Like the scientific reporting, I feel, needs to take a little bit more responsibility in the way they present information and not try to be like, this is going to get people's attention. My big are all the times that they're like, there might be aliens, like every single, you know what I mean? Like every month I feel like there's a new article that's like, we found an asteroid that like might have aliens. And it turns out that they like discovered ice. And you're just but it's because ice like could potentially melt and have like some sort of
turns out they like ice cubes.
Mind you, I think in the run-up in the American politics, I think I saw a meme go by where literally NASA or someone had reported on there being them finding other life, and people were just like, meh. With everything going on with the actual world, people are like, whatever, that's not going to kill us right now.
But yeah, so that's one. And then I think in terms of actually being able to critique research or to have, you know, some scientific literacy when it comes to publications, obviously I think we talked about this a little bit before the show started or the episode started. Like when there's a study done and it's peer reviewed and it gets published, it's just the beginning. Like, especially if that person is discovering something new, or, you know, that like this is a whole new field of inquiry, that's going to be step one in like this million step process of coming to some sort of conclusion. There's never like, science is a process. It's not, you know, an answer.
So Kemi, can I interject there? Yeah. Because you said if it's peer reviewed, how many create a peer review? How many people is that?
So it depends. Most publications will tell you, like you can find out how many people peer review an article.
Okay.
Sometimes can't, like sometimes it just gets sent to people on a committee and it's all very secretive. And this is all part of, you know, kind of the critique on the industry as a whole as being a little bit too archaic and not being able to keep up with the times. Like good research goes through a peer review, and it's just because they want it to hold up to a certain level of scrutiny.
Okay.
No, that just because something's peer reviewed doesn't make it right. Like a lot of research, not a lot, but some research still gets published and it's incorrect even after it's been peer reviewed.
I think it's important to think about or to talk about why that is as well. Because I know that's a question that I've been hearing come up a lot from people. They keep quoting studies and they say, oh, it's peer reviewed, whatever. But peer reviewing doesn't mean that the study's been replicated necessarily. So it doesn't even necessarily mean like someone could have put in improper data, because they're really peer reviewing the written portion of the study, right? Not necessarily replicating the study.
It's all based on one study, isn't it? It's like 5 people looked at that one study, not 28 studies were done, and then all 28 were reviewed.
So it kind of depends on, like you said, it kind of depends on the study. I would say most or almost all studies will eventually get replicated at some point. Like another science team or scientist is going to try to replicate what you did, if the study is groundbreaking or, you know, has like these amazing conclusions, somebody's going to try to replicate it to make sure that like your data is all correct. Peer review, yes, a team of people looking at your data, looking at your methods and your conclusions and saying like, yeah, this wasn't, you know, this makes sense. This is all sound science, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I will, most of the time that does lead to very good results. Like most of the time, just because it's a slow process and it is, you know, kind of labor intensive, most of the time that does mean that like what you read in a peer reviewed accredited journal will be at least substantial in terms of like scientific evidence. It's not going to be something that's like crazy out there that's like just non-existent. Sometimes that does happen, but though I would say for the most part those are rare. But it also doesn't mean that like that's like a great study. Like a lot of things are peer reviewed and presented and like don't really matter. Like they're just this small little component of this DNA thing or whatever. Like some studies just have no huge impact, but that doesn't mean, yeah, like they can be bad, but that doesn't mean they're like bad
So
science.
I think that's the perfect segue to bring in Andrew Wakefield's study that he had done in 1998, which was linking vaccinations. And I believe it was the MMR vaccine to
measles,
autism.
mumps.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. So this now infamous study, like disproven countless times, and even the Lancet actually, like, which published it originally, published in, and you know, as a doctor, he's been fired and discredited, and it's just like in all ways wrong. Like it's an incorrect study. The links are not statistically significant. There is just nothing to say that this is correct in any way at all. And I think this kind of brings back like the power of peer review, because his paper did pass a peer review and it was peer reviewed before it was published. And because of that, it held quite a bit of weight. And it was, you know, obviously had it been true, would have been groundbreaking, like it would have been insane. And instead, it's not true, and we still live with the consequences of the mistake of publishing it.
And sorry, for those who don't know, what did he say? He said that vaccines are useless?
So he said no. So his study concluded that there was a link, a statistically significant link between the MMR vaccine and autism in children. Okay. And which is where this whole like anti-vax,
that's the birth of the anti-vaccine.
Yeah, like vaccines cause autism, blah blah blah. Like that's where that all.
And I think his specific word was, or words was, there's an apparent participating event. Yeah. So it's a very loose. And never mind the fact that there was also proven fraudulent data. So the data was not actually. It was fraudulent data, so it was not.
And he, like, yeah, like he was, you know, like he's not a researcher anymore. He was removed from like his ability to even conduct research anymore because he fabricated data to make his results a thing. And then when other labs tried to replicate his findings, they couldn't because it's not true. And even the Lancet published, you know, a retraction saying that like all these results were wrong, and it was too late. Like that is the power that, you know, scientific evidence holds, because if you say something as a scientist, like you're entrusted with all this like knowledge and stuff, and you put it out there as somebody with a reputation and it gets peer reviewed and it gets passed, then you can cause a great deal of damage if you're wrong, which is exactly what happened.
So I want to jump a little bit, because obviously your master's, you're talking about working with communications and science and all of that. What do you think we could do now retrospectively to help people who still believe that this is accurate? I mean, there's a lot of people who aren't vaccinating their kids, and there's a lot of kids who are dying from archaic diseases that should really be, I mean, not even around anymore.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's one of those things where it's so past having one solution for, which sounds really hopeless. But I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of just being able to tackle scientific misinformation and disinformation or misinformation, I guess, and political disinformation, and being able to have some sort of solution for that. And there really just is no one solution, right? Like there's just no one way to say, like, what can we do to make people just better at knowing when they're reading something that's fake, or what can we do to make people not publish fake things, because that is like something that people do on purpose. Like there's just no way we have one solution that's just like, this is what we're going to do and it's going to be fixed. Like, well, it's just not going to happen.
What are some things though that we layman's, I am not a scientific person at all. What are some things that I can look out for? Like if I read an article, what are some metrics that I can, or some things that I can know to highlight every time I read a thing? So if I go, okay, there's an article from the New York Times that has come out about the pandemic vaccine. What do you look at to kind of understand where that information has come from, what the source is? Because it's not going to say it's been peer reviewed by this many people. It's not, we don't have access to publications, nor do I even know how to search for them. So what can I look at in an everyday feed that would come through to me to help?
Yeah, so I would say one, sound obvious or like maybe not, but
be obvious.
Okay.
I love the obvious.
So number one is like every publication, like the New York Times, any major publication will say if it's an opinion piece, and it'll say that usually right at the top. And I look for that, like, number one. That's more when I'm talking about like political misinformation. Science, not so much. So first of all, always read past the headline and the like subheader. Those are always really grabby. And then sometimes like you read the article and it has nothing to do with what the headline said. Like, yeah, it'll say something like beards are covered in poo, and then it'll be like research has found that blah, blah, blah. Like it's just, it'll be completely, sober sounding, like very scientific jargony. And so always read past the headline. And then I always look for references to scientific journals. So if I'm looking at if I'm not reading from a journal, if I'm looking at like the New York Times or the Washington Post or something that's like fairly reputable, they'll usually link the study. So that's always a good sign. If you're looking, some other publications they'll link another article, like they'll link the New York Times, or they'll link, so you'll read like a secondary newspaper and it'll just kind of link to another newspaper, and it's like you read that story and then you wrote a story and published it. Like did you read the study? Do you know? So that's another one. So if you're looking at
really dynamite tip.
Yeah,
I just want to highlight that. That's a really good tip.
Because if it's also linking to the same newspaper in another article, I'd probably have a little bit of a red flag too, right? Where it's like, oh, here's another article by the same writers, or another article by the same people, or are we drinking our own Kool-Aid, to use that example?
Not to be like rude, but this is something that a lot of science apparent sites that aren't fact-based will do, is they'll link a lot of things like, oh, this study or this piece written by, and they link to themselves. Like this happens all the time. I've read like nutritionist websites and they'll just link to something that their own website
something else they wrote.
And I'm just like, okay, well, it's not evidence just because you put a link there. Like that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And a lot of like blog posts will link to, a New York Times piece or a Vox piece or something where it's like the investigative reporter actually went and did it, and I'm just like regurgitating. At this point, it's like third hand, like tertiary research. Like I'm read from somebody who read the paper.
Right.
Have you guys ever read Trust Me, I'm Lying?
No.
I think it was Ryan Holiday. I would have to double check that. I could be wrong. But it talks about exactly this. So he was a PR who's known for spin, and he launched the book. Oh my God, I can't think of the name of it now. I read it a couple years ago, and I've tried to keep going back to it every once in a while. But so on the opposite side, how he would build out these stories, the whole book, it's split in two sides, and it's kind of like his bad side and his good side.
It is, trust me, I'm lying, Confessions of a Media Manipulator.
Yes.
Yeah.
Was it Ryan Holiday? Who wrote it?
Yeah, Ryan Holiday. Well done.
Okay. Thank you. But it's split into basically two different sides. And on the one side, he talks about everything he did in order to gain media attention for his clients. And one of the biggest things he talks about that always stuck with me, and this is specific to like political articles and stuff, but basically as newspaper down, like physical newspaper consumption, newspaper companies had to rely more on advertisement, and they had to also lay off tons of journalists. So also they didn't have the amount of people to fact check like they used to. And so what he would send these stories, or even like make up these little blogs, political blogs. He would spend like 3 months just like filling them out and then seeding his story in there, because the bigger publications would just find their stories from these like smaller political.
right.
So they would use those and like flow up, but it was completely fake. So he was just like making these. Yeah,
that's the same
really
tactic that like Russian like troll farms use.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
So if you read, there's like an investigative journalist report, I think it's the New York Times put it out like a while ago, but he goes to Russia and tries to interview people who work for this very notorious Russian media farm, and they do that. They make fake people, and those people have blogs, and those people have lives, and they have like all this stuff, and he like they can manipulate media on such a mass scale because they run a ton of these accounts with all these fake people and all these fake blogs and all these fake, and they all add each other on social media and they all like interact. But it's interesting that it's like kind of the same tactic.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sorry, I digressed, but
but that's a great digression. I mean, honestly, that fake news, scientifically backed news, you know, we are so overwhelmed by information.
Yeah.
And then knowing that those people are out there, like I've done it. I've been victim to that, but no, not victim to that, because I didn't do my research. I've taken a thing, I've reposted it, and then I've gone, I didn't actually know what the fuck that was about. Like I've done it, and I've gone, I need to be doing my research. And nowadays we've got this massive rise of social media and trusted people, and, you know, being in the public eye, or even not, just being in the social eye, you have a responsibility to do a little bit of reading. We have a responsibility, especially with a lot of these social movements that I think are well overdue. We still need to make sure we're exercising healthy critical thinking habits. So
for sure.
Can you give us a couple of healthy critical thinking habits when it comes to these things? So I see a piece of violence, and with the, let's say, you know, on someone's taken on their smartphone, I see a particular image or this one particular video. What can I do before I start posting? What can I do first? And then I also want to ask you, what's a good positive action I can take after that?
Okay.
It's
all good. So, I mean, the first thing to remember is like everyone has biases, and I mean like absolutely everyone. Like and even just thinking about like the fact that you're seeing this video means that your biases have fed into the algorithm in such a way that like you're receiving this information.
Huge point. That's a really underline, bold, italicize that. The algorithms
are crazy.
Your click behavior, and they know how long you're on each thing. So yeah, remember your biases. Yeah. And
so just remember that I mean, we kind of know this, but like they're designed in such a way to constantly keep you engaging. And so things will kind of seem to like, things will get like more and more eye-catching. Like those are the things you're going to get exposed to. There are things that you're going to interact with more and more on a like deeper and deeper level. And so I feel like remembering that your bias causes you to see what you're seeing is important. And a good way to kind of offset that, and this is painful for some people, but like just follow and interact with accounts that you don't agree with.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I think
How do you
that's
do
really
that with
important.
an open mind, Kemi?
I'm not gonna on it. But one of the things I do is I don't engage a lot of times in, and this is a lot harder on Twitter because the Twitter is just all commentary.
Monstrous, yeah.
But like on Facebook, for example, I follow a lot of news sites on Facebook, and I follow news sites that I don't agree with. And I just try never, well, I don't ever engage in comment sections, like ever.
Okay.
It's a flat rule I have, even if it's super provocative, even if it's something I really want to say something about. And I even kind of question that about myself, because Lives Matter movement, I was very quiet, and I was like, what are things that I can do in my personal circle? And I thought about that. I was like, I don't engage people online that I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about it, and I was like, for my own mental health, I'm not going to. Like, and I just don't. So I do follow media and sites that I don't agree with, and I actually read those publications. So if somebody writes an opinion piece and I think that it's really crazy, I'll still read the whole
thing. You'll
Yeah.
read the Pooh Beard story.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's still important to read that and engage with it and see it, because as much as we want to say like we are right, like you have to remember you're in an echo chamber and you're seeing and engaging with things that you agree with, and it's always gonna, like pet you on the back and tell you you're great, and you should engage with things that rub you the wrong way and make you feel uncomfortable, just to keep you sharp, if anything, like just to keep your critical thinking up.
What about with other people? Do you ever engage like in person? Do you have discourse with people that don't agree? And then how do you navigate that? And what if you know they're wrong about something? How do you know?
So on the people and who they are, I definitely would say, like in my very most inner circle, I always engage. So I think that that's really important. I'm not really like, I mean, Raquel knows me, I'm not a quiet, unopinionated person, but I think recognizing when and where is important. And I think all how, never to be, I will say, I try to always kind of appeal to reason and rationality and just make a competitive argument. And I feel like, I mean, me personally, like I'm not a very emotionally driven person. And so emotional arguments don't tend to trigger things in me that like are meant to. Like when something's super emotional, I'm sometimes like, oh, that's uncomfortable. Like, why are you doing that? So I don't use those arguments. I don't say things or try to engage people in a way that's like super emotional. I know for some people that actually works, and that is a good argument in a lot of cases. But yeah, keeping it, if it's my closest inner circle, I'm going to say what I want to say the way I say it. Mm-hmm. If it's, like kind of one step out and I'm at like having drinks with friends and it's like a friend of a friend and they say something weird or racist or kind of racist or whatever they want to call it, I'm definitely going to engage them, but it might not be, the way I would talk to my mom or Raquel or whoever. Mm-hmm. And I know that it's not the way everyone engages, and especially people of color, like they have no reason to be rational or quiet or unemotional about things like that. And yeah, all like the more the better. Like I feel like if you're gonna have an emotional outburst because somebody is being racist, do it. Like just power to you. Just for me, it's not who I am, and that I don't tend to be emotional and appeal to reason and rationality. Yeah, those are probably my tactics. But
I love that what you've done essentially is encourage us to all understand that everyone's different in how they process everything, including ourselves. So when we look at things, when we engage with other people, Raquel and I have had many conversations where we have wildly different opinions, and we love that we have wildly different opinions, because really the key is to be able to have good discourse about those differing opinions and still hold a fundamental level of respect for a fellow human being and them having a very different life. Yeah. And them getting to where they got to for a reason. You know, I constantly think about people who are all smaller communities. I'm from a super city, and you've lived all over the world as well. You can attest to being the type of person that I'm always like, do you know, as long as it's not affecting me and you're not trying to force me to do you not in a rude way, then great. Like, I want to understand, but I don't need to agree. And I think smaller towns in my mind, but then again, I don't know that for a fact. I'm saying smaller towns just because that's my personal bias. But situations, you're going to have a totally different view, and they're going to be surrounded by totally different things that impact that.
I think also it's important to remember that, and I kind of try to go into conversations with this in mind, but a lot of times you're just not going to change someone's mind. Like, you might plant a seed that they'll, you know, go do their own research, or especially like going back to when Raquel, you asked this question, you were saying like, what do you do if you know someone's wrong? Well, with science, like, a lot of the time there is a right answer. Like, this has been studied, and like most scientific evidence points to XYZ. So like something like climate change or vaccines or etc. But if you're talking to somebody who has a very strong belief in the opposite, you're not going to be the person that changes their mind. Like, I'm sorry, but you're not. And I think remembering that is important. When you're talking about that are a matter of opinion, I think that we're losing, because of our echo chambers and because of the way people interact online, we're losing some of that ability to be able to have discourse with other people, because we're so used to just talking to people who agree with us or interacting with media that we agree with. And we're losing that kind of that other interaction, which again goes back to why I think it's important to kind of reach across and interact with media that you don't agree with, follow news sites that you don't agree with, follow people on Twitter that you don't agree with, because if anything, it just disrupts the algorithm a little bit. You know, it just keeps the algorithm from like just constantly giving you things like, oh, this is the person that you are in AI world, like in the digital space, and these are all the things that you're gonna agree with and you're gonna click on and you're gonna like. Well, if you purposefully go out there and interact with stuff that you don't agree with, it kind of just breaks that up a little bit, and you're in a little bit less of an echo chamber, which I think is important for critical thinking.
Love it. So we don't have a ton more time to talk for days on this, and I would love to, but we don't have days. Let's talk. I mean, you've given us a little bit of a slice on the pandemic. I did want to kind of say, is there anything, you know, just very quickly that would pop out for you if we're, you know, this is a global audience. So what can people look to in their own world particularly regarding the pandemic? Is there anything that might help us?
So I think, do you want to specify that? Maybe you can take like an angle with it, like masks, for example. There's people who believe in masks and there's people who don't believe in masks. Like, how would you recommend that they can
find their answer?
I would say the big like research that isn't being paid for by people, that is just out there for people, that's public. So the WHO, your governmental aids, the CDC, massive international organizations, and they, like, the WHO isn't beholden to a corporation or people. It's literally just there to help improve the health of the world. And so they do the best that they can. Their recommendations are constantly changing, and that is one big takeaway I want for people to know is, like I said earlier, like, science is a process and it's constantly evolving, and we're watching it evolve in real time really, really quickly with the pandemic. And this is something that I hear from a lot of people, like, well, they recommended this and now they're recommending this, they must all be wrong. And I'm like, no, they recommended that because they didn't know better at the time. Like, when we know better, we do better. That's the way science works, and that's the point. Like, we do all this research so that we can inform people better later on, and it'll just keep evolving. Like, they might say tomorrow that masks are all ineffective, which they're not. Everyone should wear their masks, especially in public, closed spaces. And then we would not wear them. Actually, going back to studies, I saw one that Boeing funded a study and then said that as long as everyone wears their masks on airplanes, they're completely harmless. And it's like, no. And then going back to studies and biases and things, like they looked at a very narrow set and like very strict requirements. Like everybody would have to be wearing their masks at all times, facing forward, no turning, no talking, never taking off their masks. And I'm like, well, that doesn't happen in real life.
Well, and that in brings that case, in like efficacy, right? Like how well things are used, which if you're ever looking at studies to do with medicine or anything like that, that's always a big thing. The medicine only works as well as people using it. Yeah. If it works.
Right. Yeah. It's like that. It's what is it? It's Anchorman. 60% of the time it works every time.
I forgot about that.
Oh. Yeah. So I will say just, the boys on the pandemic is kind of just, if you're kind of turned off by like big scientific like jargon or whatever studies, just follow like WHO puts out these kind of news reports. They're pretty short. They have different countries. I would say look to that. Also, like he has a COVID specific page, and the OECD is a multi-international organization. Like these organizations are primarily funded by just money coming from these different countries, and they're meant for everybody. And so that kind of research is always reliable, and you can expect that there is going to be, today we say this and tomorrow we're going to say something else. Like that's kind of the way science works. And we're just seeing it sped up and really confusing right now.
So those 4 words, science is a process.
Yeah.
I love that.
Same with evolution. Okay, so we're running out of time, but in the last minute, I would love you to tell us, who is future Kemi? Where are you going next? You're in the middle of studying your master's. You've got this huge depth of knowledge in a variety of areas, and you've gathered to make this successful career. So I'm going to do this interview question of like, where do you see yourself in a year? Because a year is the new 5 years. So
well, I think to just kind of, I'm literally looking towards the end of my thesis as like a golden crowning achievement. I'm in the middle of that right now. But I just be able to combine my 2 passions. So design, and more specifically like design thinking and science in the science process. And if I can combine those and make that into a career, I will be so happy. I will say I'll probably write out kind of science and design and how they can come together. And I'm actually doing a futures study. So talking about strategic foresight, a future study on disinformation in Canada specifically, and looking at it from a Canadian lens, and how to media in Canada. And
amazing.
So
where can people find that?
Well, it's not published yet, so
when it is, you're gonna have to come back.
I will let you know.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I'm gonna do my quick, trying to make it 30 seconds of buzzwords for the whole episode for everyone. We talked about BO, talked about peer reviewing, we talked about scientific reporting, looking for information, how to look for information. The book Trust Me by Ryan Holiday was a good little book that we can link people to, of remembering your biases, following different accounts, don't engage in the comments, and if you do engage, know when, where, and how. And you're not going to change other people's minds, but overall, when we know better, I love this quote. This is the Kemi quote that I love. When we know better, we do better. Science is a process.
What?
That was great. Great summary. I will say that actually might be an actual quote, and it's not mine. It sounds too good to be from me. I feel like that's definitely somebody else's.
I mean, we could just pretend, right? Everyone's just going to listen to us, and we'll be like, this is what we heard from someone that it's this, and now it's Kemi's, which would be hilarious and very ironic. I guess, is irony the right word to use then? I'm so scared to use the word irony now ever because of Alanis Morissette. But so where we can find you, we can find Kemi on Instagram, which is our favorite platform right now, is at Kemi. And Kemi is KEMI.Miriam. You can find her under, is it Havelin? Miriam Havelin, and same on Twitter, and her website is miriamhavelin.com. So Kemi, Miriam, Kemi, Miriam. Thank you. That's a good one. Thank you for coming on to our lovely little show. And you've made it so much easier for me to allow myself to look at things in different ways. And I think our audiences will not be able to thank you enough.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening, Bombshells. In order to continue to elevate, please rate and follow or subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts, and hit us up on Instagram at Bombshell Brunches, where we'll be listening for your feedback, ideas, and guest suggestions. Until next time, stay focused, fierce, and fabulous.